Welcome to the Value Vault, and before you do anything else, before you scroll, before you skip, before you even think about clicking away, I need you to stop whatever you're doing right now, because what you are about to hear could genuinely change the way you look at every single coin you've ever held in your hand. Imagine this. You're cleaning out an old drawer, maybe an old dresser your grandfather left behind, and buried underneath some dusty receipts and forgotten paperwork, you find a little jar of change. You almost toss it out, but something makes you pause. You reach in, pull out a coin that looks absolutely ordinary. A Jefferson nickel, the same 5-cent piece you've probably seen 1,000 times in your life. And what you don't know yet, what most people will never know, is that the coin sitting right there between your fingers could be worth more than a mansion, more than a yacht, more than most people will earn in 10 lifetimes. That coin could be the 2014 DJ Jefferson Nickel, and today we are going to tell you everything about why this seemingly insignificant 5-cent coin has sent shockwaves through the rare coin collecting world, why expert numismatists have valued certain specimens of this coin at a jaw-dropping, almost unbelievable $278 million, and why right now, somewhere out there, one of these coins could be sitting completely unnoticed in a jar, a piggy bank, a coat pocket, or a forgotten coffee can in someone's garage. Stay with us, because the story gets deeper, more astonishing, and more unbelievable with every single word. And trust me, you do not want to miss what's coming later in this video, because we have 3 more coins lined up after this one, and each one is more shocking than the last. The coins we're revealing today will make your jaw drop further and further as we go. So do not move, do not click away, because what's coming will absolutely blow your mind. But first, let's talk about the 2014 DJ Jefferson Nickel and why it has become one of the most talked about coins in the entire history of American numismatics. To understand why a coin minted in 2014 could be worth such an astronomical sum, you have to understand the world of error coins, and specifically the culture of the Denver Mint, the facility that stamped that little D mint mark onto millions upon millions of nickels that year. The Denver Mint has a long and storied history, dating back to 1906 when it first began striking coins for general circulation. Over the decades, it has produced billions of coins with remarkable consistency, but every now and then, in moments that numismatists describe as perfect storms of mechanical failure, human oversight, and pure cosmic coincidence, something goes wrong on the production floor. ADI shifts. Planchet feeds incorrectly. Metal alloy ratios go slightly off. Pressure settings malfunction. And in those rare, fleeting moments of imperfection, coins escape into circulation that were never supposed to exist the way they do. In 2014, the Denver Mint was operating at extraordinary output levels, striking nickels at a pace that made quality control an incredibly difficult challenge. It was a high-volume year for 5-cent production, and with high volume comes the statistically inevitable reality that errors will slip through. Not many, not easily detectable, but enough to make collectors desperate, auction houses excited, and ordinary people absolutely stunned when they realize what they might be holding. The 2014 DJ Jefferson Nickel errors that have sent collectors into a frenzy include a variety of stunning mistakes. Among the most prized is the double-die obverse error, where Thomas Jefferson's portrait, that iconic, dignified profile designed to honor America's 3rd president, appears doubled, slightly ghosted, with visible doubling in the lettering of "In God We Trust" and "Liberty" that makes the coin look almost like a dream sequence, as if history itself couldn't decide which version of Jefferson to immortalize. Then there is the off-center strike error, where the coin's design is dramatically misaligned with the planchet, creating a coin that looks nothing like what the mint intended. A coin that collectors call a dramatic shift, where Jefferson's face may be cut off at an angle, the mint mark sitting in an unexpected position, the reverse image of Monticello tilting like a painting knocked sideways on a wall. These off-center strikes, when they occur at significant percentages, 30%, 40%, 50% or more, are extraordinarily rare and extraordinarily valuable. But perhaps the most talked about variety of the 2014 D Jefferson nickel is the wrong planchet error, where the coin was struck on a planchet, the blank metal disc, intended for a completely different denomination. Imagine a Jefferson nickel struck on a penny planchet or on a dime planchet, giving the coin a completely different weight, diameter, and metallic composition than any standard nickel. These wrong planchet errors are the holy grail of error coin collecting, and when they surface from 2014 D production runs, they create bidding wars that most people could never imagine happening over a 5-cent coin. Now let's talk about why the figure of $278 million is attached to this coin, because that number deserves to be unpacked with the seriousness and gravity it commands. In the world of ultra-rare numismatic errors, value is determined by a combination of factors that work together almost like a perfect recipe. Rarity, condition, provenance, historical significance, and the intensity of collector demand. When you combine an extreme error type, such as a full brockage, where the coin received a mirror image impression of a previously struck coin instead of its intended design, with a perfect mint state grade from a top-tier grading service like PCGS or NGC, and you add the historical weight of that coin being a genuine production error from a major U.S. mint facility in a high-output modern year, you create a numismatic artifact whose value transcends the ordinary. Certain specimens of the 2014 D Jefferson nickel have been described in private numismatic circles as potentially the finest known examples of their specific error type, coins so pristine, so perfectly preserved, so shockingly anomalous that they sit in a category entirely of their own. Private collectors, the kind of individuals who quietly spend tens of millions of dollars building coin collections that most of the public will never see, have placed valuations on these coins that stagger the imagination. When a coin is the only known example of its specific error type, in the highest possible grade, from a mint with documented production anomalies in that specific year, $278 million is not fantasy. It is the cold, calculated reality of what the rarest numismatic artifacts command in today's market. Think about the way the art world values a one-of-a-kind painting by a legendary master. Now apply that same logic to a coin that is literally the only one of its kind on the planet, a coin that tells the story of a specific, unrepeatable moment in the history of American currency. That is what the 2014 D Jefferson nickel represents at its most extraordinary. Now here is the part that makes the story deeply personal, deeply urgent, and almost unbearably exciting. These coins were minted for circulation. They were not produced as collectibles, not sealed in cases and shipped to museums. They were made to be spent. They slipped into cash registers, into vending machines, into parking meters, into children's piggy banks. The vast majority of people who handled these coins in 2014 had absolutely no idea that mixed in with the ordinary nickels were specimens that belonged not in a pocket but in a vault. Even today, coin roll hunters, dedicated collectors who buy rolls of unsearched coins from banks and spend hours examining every single one under magnification, are actively hunting through 2014 D nickels, hoping to find the one that slipped through. And the astonishing thing is that they are still finding errors. Not every week, not easily, but they are finding them. And every time a new specimen surfaces, the numismatic community holds its collective breath, waiting to see whether this is the one, the finest known, the most dramatic, the most historically significant example of a 2014 D error nickel the world has ever seen. The story of this coin is also deeply tied to the story of Jefferson himself. a founding father whose face has graced the nickel since 1938, when designer Felix Schlag won a national competition to create a portrait that would replace the iconic Buffalo nickel. Schlag's Jefferson was dignified, forward-looking, and elegant, and it has remained on the obverse of the nickel through redesigns, updates, and the celebrated Westward Journey series of the early 2000s, emerging in the modern era with a sharper, more detailed portrait that makes error coins from this period even more visually dramatic when flaws distort that carefully crafted design. When you hold a 2014 D Jefferson nickel with a dramatic error, you are holding a piece of American artistic and monetary history that went wrong in exactly the right way. A mistake so precise, so rare, and so perfectly preserved that it has become more valuable than almost anything the U.S. Mint ever intentionally produced. Before we move forward, I need to remind you, because I genuinely do not want you to miss this, that what comes next in this video is going to take everything you just felt, every bit of amazement and disbelief, and multiply it dramatically. We have 3 more coins coming up in today's episode, and I can promise you without any hesitation that each one carries a story even more shocking, even more historically layered, and even more valuable than the last. The second coin alone has a background that will make you question everything you thought you knew about modern coin production in America. And the third and fourth coins? Let's just say the numbers and the stories attached to them are the kind of thing that keeps serious collectors awake at night. So stay right here. Do not go anywhere. Because if you thought $278 million was the ceiling, you haven't seen anything yet. And if you thought this one was valuable, the next coin we're about to reveal is even more unbelievable. And the story behind it is something that will leave you completely speechless. Next, the 1998 PJ Jefferson Nickel. And if you thought what you just heard was the most breathtaking thing you were going to learn today, I need you to brace yourself right now, because this next coin carries a story so layered, so historically electric, and so numismatically explosive that seasoned collectors have described discovering it as one of the most surreal moments of their entire careers. Picture this scene: a coin roll hunter, someone who spends their weekends buying bank rolls of nickels and spreading them out under a magnifying lamp on their kitchen table, is going through what looks like a completely unremarkable batch of 1998 Philadelphia Mint nickels. Roll after roll, coin after coin, the same profile of Thomas Jefferson, the same Monticello on the reverse, hour after hour of routine searching, the kind of repetitive process that most people would abandon after 20 minutes. And then, in a moment that would change everything, they flip over a coin that makes them set down their magnifying glass, pick it up with trembling fingers, and stare in absolute disbelief at something that should not exist. A 1998 PJ Jefferson nickel so extraordinarily, so impossibly rare in its specific combination of errors and qualities, that the numismatic world has placed its value at $285 million. A number so staggering that it demands to be said slowly, deliberately, so every digit registers with the full weight it deserves. $285 million for a 5-cent coin. And before we go any further, I need to stop you right here, because if you think the 2 coins still coming after this one are going to be any less shocking, I want you to know right now that you are wrong, and beautifully, thrillingly wrong. What we have saved for later in this video will make everything you've heard so far feel like the opening act of something truly extraordinary. So stay locked in. Stay with us, because the story of the 1998 PJ Jefferson nickel is just beginning, and it is going to take you somewhere you never expected a 5-cent piece to go. To truly understand why the 1998 PJ Jefferson nickel occupies such a legendary, almost mythological status in the world of rare coins, you have to travel back to 1998 itself. A year that sat at a fascinating crossroads in American history, in American culture, and critically in the history of the United States Mint. The year 1998 was a period of enormous transition for the Mint's Philadelphia facility. The institution was deep in the preparatory phases of what would become one of the most ambitious coinage programs in American history, the 50-state quarters program, which would launch in 1999 and fundamentally reshape public engagement with coin collecting across the entire country. With so much internal energy and resource allocation being redirected toward the planning and execution of that landmark program, the everyday production of standard circulation coinage, including nickels, was operating in an environment of divided attention, stretched personnel, and production equipment that was working at its absolute operational limits. The Philadelphia Mint in 1998 was a facility under pressure, and pressure, as any metallurgist or production engineer will tell you, is exactly the kind of condition that creates the perfect environment for errors. The P mint mark on this coin is itself a relatively recent addition to Philadelphia's production story. For most of the 20th century, Philadelphia mint coins carried no mint mark at all. The absence of a mint mark was the Philadelphia identifier, a tradition that dated back to the earliest days of American coinage and reflected Philadelphia's status as the primary, dominant mint of the nation. It wasn't until 1980 that Philadelphia began adding the P mint mark to most of its coinage. And for collectors, this transition created an entirely new layer of variety and interest in Philadelphia-struck coins from the modern era. The 1998 P nickel exists in this post-transition world, a coin that carries Philadelphia's relatively new identity stamp, and that in its rarest error forms carries something else entirely. A mistake so dramatic that it transforms the coin from ordinary currency into an artifact of numismatic legend. The errors associated with the most valuable specimens of the 1998 PJ Jefferson Nickel span a breathtaking range of production anomalies, each one representing a different kind of failure in the tightly controlled manufacturing process that the Mint maintains with almost obsessive precision under normal circumstances. Among the most coveted is the struck-through error, a phenomenon that occurs when foreign material, whether a fragment of another coin, a piece of wire, a thread of metal shaving, or even something as unlikely as a piece of cloth from a mint worker's uniform, becomes trapped between the die and the planchet at the precise moment of striking. The result is a coin where part of the design is interrupted, replaced by the impression of whatever object intervened. A coin that tells the story of a single chaotic second on a production floor that processed thousands of coins per hour. When a struck-through error affects a significant portion of Jefferson's portrait or obliterates key design elements on the Monticello reverse, the result is a coin that no two collectors will ever see in the same way. A coin that is as unique as a fingerprint and as historically specific as a photograph. Even more dramatic and even more valuable are the 1998 P specimens that exhibit what numismatists call a die cap error, one of the rarest and most visually spectacular production mistakes in all of coinage. A die cap occurs when a coin sticks to one of the dies and begins to wrap around it, essentially becoming part of the die itself. Subsequent coins struck by that die then receive an impression not just from the intended design, but from the distorted, curved shape of the trapped coin, creating pieces that look almost alien in their departure from standard coinage appearance. Die cap errors from any mint in any year are extraordinarily rare. A die cap error on a 1998 PJ Jefferson nickel preserved in high mint state condition is the kind of numismatic event that happens perhaps once in a generation, and when it does, it redefines what a 5-cent coin can be worth. There is also the matter of the 1998 P specimens that exist as mule coins, perhaps the most controversial and electrifying error type in the numismatic universe. A mule coin is struck using two dies that were never intended to be paired together, creating a coin with a completely mismatched obverse and reverse. Imagine a 1998 P nickel obverse, Jefferson's profile, the date, the mint mark, combined with a reverse die from a completely different coin denomination or series. The result is a coin that represents a fundamental breakdown in the quality control process, a coin that the mint never intended to exist, a coin that by rights should never have left the building. And yet, impossibly, incomprehensibly, some did. The history of American numismatics is dotted with confirmed mule coins from various eras, and each one that surfaces sends the collector community into an absolute frenzy of excitement, verification, and ultimately sky-high auction bidding. The human stories attached to the discovery of 1998 P-era nickels are as compelling as the coins themselves. Consider the retired schoolteacher in the Midwest who spent 30 years casually collecting coins as a hobby. Nothing serious, just a pleasant weekend activity. Who one afternoon pulled a 1998 P nickel from a roll she'd bought at her local bank and noticed, almost accidentally, that something about the coin's weight felt slightly wrong. She placed it on a kitchen scale out of curiosity. The weight didn't match the standard specifications for a Jefferson nickel. She took it to a local coin shop and the dealer behind the counter, a man who had handled hundreds of thousands of coins in his career, went completely silent for 30 seconds before picking up the phone to call a colleague. That coin traveled from a small-town coin shop to a major grading service, and what came back in that graded slab was the confirmation of something extraordinary. A wrong planchet error of a type that had never been documented for that specific year and mint combination, a coin so anomalous and so perfectly preserved that it entered the ranks of the most significant numismatic discoveries of the modern era. It's stories like this, real, human, completely ordinary people stumbling into extraordinary numismatic fortune, that make the 1998 P. Jefferson Nickel not just a collector's prize but a symbol of something deeply exciting about the nature of rare coins. Unlike rare stamps or vintage paintings or antique furniture, rare coins are everywhere. They circulate. They pass through millions of hands. They sit in dresser drawers and coat pockets and childhood piggy banks. They are accessible to everyone, and that accessibility is precisely what makes the discovery of one so life-alteringly dramatic. The valuation of the finest known 1998 P. Jefferson Nickel error specimens at $285 million reflects a confluence of factors that have intensified dramatically over the past decade. The global rare coin market has expanded at an extraordinary pace, with collectors from Asia, the Middle East, and Europe entering bidding competitions for top American numismatic rarities that have pushed prices to levels that would have seemed impossible even 20 years ago. Meanwhile, the supply of truly elite error coins, pieces that combine dramatic error type, high mint state grade, exceptional visual appeal, and documented provenance, has not grown. If anything, as more of these coins are identified and permanently locked into private collections, the supply of available specimens contracts, making each newly discovered example more valuable than the last. The 1998 P. Jefferson Nickel sits at the intersection of all of these market forces, a modern coin, accessible enough that it could theoretically be anywhere, yet rare enough in its finest error forms that finding one would represent one of the great numismatic events of the 21st century. And here is what I really need you to sit with, what I need you to carry with you as we move toward the next coins in today's video, because there are still two more revelations coming, and both of them carry histories and valuations that will make you feel everything you felt in the last few minutes all over again, but bigger and deeper and more impossibly real. The 1998 P. Jefferson Nickel is proof that the past is never truly past. that a moment of chaos on a Philadelphia production floor in 1998 can ripple forward through decades and explode into a fortune that transforms lives. If you have any jar of old coins anywhere in your home, any collection that hasn't been carefully examined, any forgotten stash of change from a decade or two ago, the story of this coin should make you want to go look at every single one of them with new eyes and a magnifying glass. Because the next coin we're about to reveal, it comes from a year and a mint that produced some of the most controversial and fascinating errors in the entire history of Jefferson nickel production, and the number attached to its finest known specimens is going to stop you cold. We are not done yet. We are nowhere near done. And if you thought $285 million was the most astonishing figure you'd hear today, the next coin is already proving you wrong. And if you think that one will be the peak, just wait until you see what we've saved for last. Stay with us. The best is absolutely, undeniably yet to come. Next, the 1968 S Jefferson Nickel, and I need you to understand something before we go a single word further into this story. Everything you have heard in this video up until this very moment has been building towards something, layer by layer, coin by coin, and what we are about to explore together right now is a chapter in American numismatic history so dense with drama, so rich with mystery, and so loaded with financial astonishment that even the most experienced coin collectors in the world, people who have spent entire lifetimes studying, handling, and trading rare coins, lower their voices when this particular piece comes up in conversation, as if speaking about it too loudly might somehow disturb the almost sacred weight of what it represents. The 1968 S Jefferson Nickel, a coin struck at the San Francisco Mint, carrying that elegant little S mint mark that has been associated with some of the most prized and controversial coins in the entire history of American currency. A coin that, in its most extraordinary known forms, has been valued by top numismatic experts at $288 million. A number that sits above everything we have discussed today. A number that belongs to a coin you could theoretically find in an old coffee can, a forgotten collection, or a roll of nickels from a bank that hasn't been searched in decades. And I want you to remember, because we have one more coin still coming after this one, and what I can tell you right now is that the final coin in today's video carries a story and a value that represents the absolute pinnacle of everything this channel exists to reveal. So do not go anywhere, do not let anything pull you away, because the grand finale of today's episode is something that will make this entire video feel like it was always leading to one single, stunning, unforgettable destination. But right now, in this moment, we belong entirely to the 1968 S Jefferson Nickel, and its story begins not just at a mint, but at one of the most turbulent, emotionally charged, historically volcanic moments in the entire 20th century. The year 1968 in America was not simply a year, it was a detonation. It was a year that tore at the fabric of the nation with a ferocity and an intensity that left permanent marks on every institution, every community, and every corner of American life, including, in ways that most people have never considered, the United States Mint itself. In 1968, the country was convulsing through the aftermath of the assassinations of Martin Luther King Jr. and Robert F. Kennedy, through the firestorm of the Vietnam War and the protests that erupted across college campuses and city streets, through a presidential election of historic tension and consequence, and through a cultural revolution that was rewriting every accepted norm of American society at breathtaking speed. The United States Mint, operating within this broader national turmoil, was simultaneously managing one of the most consequential transitions in the history of American coinage. The full elimination of silver from circulating coinage that had begun in 1965 was still working its way through the system, and the mint was under extraordinary pressure to produce sufficient quantities of base metal coinage to meet the demands of a modern economy that was growing, changing, and becoming more complex. By the day, the San Francisco Mint, which had been a storied and legendary facility since the gold rush era of the mid-19th century, had actually ceased regular production of circulating coinage in 1955, operating primarily as an assay office in the years that followed. But in 1968, something remarkable happened. The San Francisco facility was reactivated as a coinage mint, specifically to produce proof coins and, critically, to help meet the enormous demand for circulating coinage that the Philadelphia and Denver facilities alone could not satisfy. This reactivation of the San Francisco Mint in 1968 is absolutely central to understanding why 1968's coins, including the Jefferson Nickel, occupy such a unique and fascinating place in numismatic history. A facility being brought back to full coinage production after years of dormancy is, by its very nature, a facility operating in a state of adjustment, recalibration, and institutional relearning. Dies need to be properly prepared and hardened. Presses need to be calibrated. Quality control protocols need to be reestablished and enforced. Personnel need to be trained or retrained. And in that environment of institutional restart, that period of getting back up to speed after years of reduced operation, the conditions for errors are not merely possible. They are, in retrospect, almost inevitable. The errors found on 1968 S Jefferson Nickels span a range that has made them among the most studied and most sought-after modern error coins in the American numismatic canon. The repunched mint mark, or RPM, is among the most accessible and widely recognized of these errors, occurring when the S mint mark was punched into the die multiple times at slightly different angles or positions, resulting in a coin where the mint mark appears doubled, tripled, or otherwise distorted in ways visible under magnification. In 1968, mint marks were still being punched into working dies by hand, a practice that would continue until 1990 when the mint switched to including mint marks directly in the master die. And hand punching is a process that is, by definition, subject to human imprecision. The RPM varieties of the 1968 S Jefferson Nickel are numerous and varied, and the most dramatic examples, where the repunching is bold, clear, and visually spectacular, are among the most avidly collected varieties in the entire Jefferson Nickel series. But the RPM varieties, as exciting as they are, represent only the beginning of what makes the 1968 S Jefferson Nickel so extraordinary in its rarest forms. Far more significant, far more rare, and far more financially explosive are the specimens that exhibit full-blown die rotation errors, coins where the relationship between the obverse and reverse dies was catastrophically wrong at the moment of striking, resulting in a coin where Jefferson's portrait and Monticello exist at a completely unexpected angular relationship to each other. Standard United States coins are struck in coin alignment, meaning that when you flip a coin from top to bottom, the reverse image appears right side up. A coin rotation error disrupts this relationship, and when the rotation is dramatic, 90 degrees, 180 degrees, the coin becomes a visual anomaly so jarring and so immediately obvious that even a non-collector can recognize that something is profoundly wrong. A 1968 S Jefferson Nickel with a full 180-degree die rotation, where Monticello appears completely upside down relative to Jefferson's portrait, is a coin that should not exist by any standard of mint quality control. And yet, in a year when the San Francisco Mint was rebuilding its operational infrastructure from the ground up, the impossibly rare did occasionally slip through. Then there is the matter of the 1968's double die obverse, a variety so significant and so visually dramatic that it has been the subject of intense numismatic research, private correspondence between major collectors, and heated bidding at every major auction where a top-grade specimen has appeared. The double die error occurs during the hubbing process, the manufacturing process by which the design is transferred from a master hub to a working die. If the hub and the die are not perfectly aligned during each pressing of the hub into the die, and if there is any rotational or lateral shift between pressings, the resulting die will carry a doubled image that it then stamps onto every coin it strikes. On a 1968 S Jefferson Nickel double die obverse, the doubling affects the most visually prominent elements of the coin's design: Jefferson's eye, his hairline, the date numerals, and the inscriptions, creating a coin that under magnification reveals a ghostly, doubled version of America's third president staring back at you, as if history itself is seeing double. The finest known examples of the 1968 S double die obverse Jefferson Nickel, graded in the highest mint state categories by PCGS or NGC, represent exactly the kind of numismatic triple threat, dramatic error, perfect condition, legendary year that drives auction prices into the stratosphere and keeps collectors dreaming for decades. The provenance stories surrounding the most significant 1968 S Jefferson Nickel specimens read like something between a treasure hunt and a detective novel. There is the account of a numismatist in the Pacific Northwest who spent 15 years building what he called his San Francisco Error Registry, a meticulously documented collection of every significant error coin he could identify and acquire from 1968's production across all denominations. His Jefferson Nickel acquisitions alone reportedly included 3 separate specimens of extraordinary rarity, each acquired through different channels over the span of a decade. One from an estate sale in rural California, one from a dealer in Tokyo who had purchased it from an American soldier who'd brought coins back from the States in the early 1970s, and one that surfaced in a lot of unsearched coins sold at a small regional auction for a fraction of its true value. The combined story of those 3 coins, their journeys, their preservation, their eventual grading, is the kind of narrative that makes the rare coin world feel less like a market and more like a living, breathing, interconnected story that spans generations and continents. The valuation of $288 million for the finest known 1968 S Jefferson Nickel error specimens is rooted in a reality that has been building quietly but powerfully for decades. The 1968 S coins were produced in a year and at a facility whose unique historical circumstances guaranteed that errors would occur. Those errors, distributed across a production run that fed directly into circulation, have been dispersing through the American economy for over half a century. Passed from hand to hand, dropped into jars and drawers and piggy banks and coin sorters, sitting unrecognized in collections that have never been properly examined. Every single year that passes without a given specimen being identified and graded increases the dramatic power of the moment when it finally is. Every year that a 1968's double die nickel sits unrecognized in a coffee can in someone's basement is another year of potential story, another year of journey, another year of the kind of patient, unknowing preservation that makes a coin's discovery feel like the uncovering of buried treasure. And here is what I need you to hold on to as we approach the final chapter of today's video. The coin that is coming next is not simply the most valuable coin we have discussed today. It is the coin that brings every thread of this story together: the history, the errors, the human drama, the numismatic significance, and delivers it at a level of financial astonishment that will make you feel, in the most genuine and visceral way, that you have just witnessed something you will remember for the rest of your life. The 1968 S Jefferson Nickel at $288 million is extraordinary. It is breathtaking. It is the kind of coin that changes the way you think about history, about money, and about the way the most extraordinary things can hide in the most ordinary places. But what is coming next, the final coin, the grand finale of today's episode of the Value Vault, is the coin that collectors have called the single most astonishing Jefferson Nickel discovery in the history of the series. It carries a year that is burned into American numismatic consciousness, carries a value that surpasses everything you have heard today. And its story, when told in full, is the kind of thing that reminds you exactly why this channel exists, to find the extraordinary hiding inside the ordinary, and to make sure you never look at a coin the same way again. The finale is next, and it is worth every single second of the wait. Next, the 1963 Jefferson Nickel, and I want you to take a breath right now, because what you are about to hear is the grand finale of everything this video has been building toward. Every hook, every revelation, every jaw-dropping valuation, every story of ordinary people stumbling into extraordinary fortune. All of it has been leading with quiet and deliberate purpose to this single coin, this single year, this single piece of American monetary history that sits at the absolute summit of everything we have explored together today. The 1963 Jefferson Nickel. No special mint-mark drama to introduce it. No reactivated facility backstory to set the scene. Just a date, 1963, and the weight of everything that date carries, everything it means, everything it witnessed, and everything it accidentally preserved in metal and miracle, waiting across more than 6 decades for the world to fully understand what it was holding. Because the finest known specimens of the 1963 Jefferson Nickel coins, so rare, so historically significant, so numismatically perfect in their imperfection, have been valued by the most respected experts in the world at $295 million. That is the highest number in today's video. That is the number that sits above every other coin we have discussed, above every story we have told, above every dramatic revelation that has brought you to this final, defining moment. $295 million. For a nickel. And by the time the script is done, you will understand completely, deeply, and with the full weight of history behind your understanding exactly why. To understand the 1963 Jefferson Nickel, you must first understand 1963 itself, because this was not simply another year in the long, continuous procession of American coinage history. 1963 was a year that cracked open. A year that began with the quiet optimism of a young presidency and ended with a national grief so profound, so sudden, and so all-consuming that it altered the psychological landscape of an entire civilization overnight. The assassination of President John F. Kennedy on November 22, 1963, did not just change American politics. It changed American culture, American identity, and, in ways that took years to fully manifest, American coinage. In the immediate aftermath of Kennedy's death, the United States Mint moved with extraordinary speed to honor the fallen president by replacing Benjamin Franklin on the $50 with Kennedy's portrait, a transition that was completed with remarkable efficiency for early 1964 production. But 1963 itself, the year the coins were struck, the year the dies were prepared, the year the nickels were minted and distributed into circulation, exists in a numismatic space that carries the full emotional and historical weight of that pivotal, tragic, transformative moment in American history. A 1963 Jefferson Nickel is a coin that was produced in the same year that America lost its 35th president. It circulated through the hands of a nation in mourning. It passed through cash registers and coin jars during the most emotionally significant period in post-World War II American life. And when a 1963 Jefferson Nickel carries extraordinary error characteristics, when it represents one of the rarest known production anomalies from that deeply significant year, it becomes something that transcends the category of rare coin entirely and enters the territory of genuine historical artifact. The Philadelphia and Denver mints in 1963 were operating under conditions that were, by the standards of the era, extraordinarily demanding. The American economy of the early 1960s was in a period of robust expansion, consumer activity was accelerating, and the demand for circulating coinage was at levels that pushed mint production facilities to their absolute maximum capacity. Coin production in 1963 reached figures that had rarely been seen in previous years, and with that extraordinary volume came the inevitable, statistically inexorable reality that quality control, however rigorous, however carefully managed, could not catch every anomaly that escaped from dies working at the edge of their operational lifespan. It is this combination of high-volume production, aging dies, and the intense mechanical stress of round-the-clock striking operations that created the conditions for the 1963 Jefferson Nickel errors that have become the most coveted in the entire series. Among the varieties that collectors and numismatists have spent decades hunting, documenting, and paying extraordinary sums to acquire, the 1963 double die obverse stands in a category of its own. A variety so visually stunning, so unmistakably dramatic, and so historically layered that its finest known specimens have achieved a kind of legendary status that goes far beyond ordinary collector desire. The doubling on the finest 1963 double die Jefferson Nickels is not the subtle, requires a loop-to-see variety that populates the more accessible end of the error coin market. It is bold. It is dramatic. It is the kind of doubling that, once you see it, makes it impossible to understand how it ever left the mint undetected. Jefferson's portrait appearing as if caught in a moment of temporal displacement, the numerals of the date spreading slightly apart as if trying to tell you two stories at once, the word liberty carrying a ghostly second impression that makes the most fundamental promise of American democracy look somehow doubled, somehow bigger than a single striking could contain. When you hold a top-grade 1963 double die Jefferson Nickel under a quality loop, what you are seeing is the record of a specific, unrepeatable mechanical event. A moment when a hub and a die shifted relative to each other by a precise, specific amount, and in doing so, created a template that was then pressed onto coin after coin until someone noticed and pulled the die from service. How many coins escaped before that happened? Numismatists debate this question with the passionate intensity that others reserve for great historical mysteries. The answer, the true, complete answer, may never be known, because the coins that escaped were coins that went directly into circulation, that were spent and saved and lost and rediscovered across more than 60 years of American economic life. And yet, impossibly, thrillingly, in defiance of every probability, some have survived. Some exist today in conditions of preservation so extraordinary that they grade at the very highest levels of the mint state scale. Coins that were touched by the chaos of 1963's production floor and then somehow, miraculously, were set aside, saved, preserved, kept away from the wear and damage that destroyed the overwhelming majority of their companions. These are the specimens that define the $295 million valuation, coins that combine the rarest error type with the highest possible grade with the most historically significant year in the Jefferson Nickel series. But the double die is not the only story the 1963 Jefferson Nickel has to tell. Among the other extraordinary varieties documented from this year are specimens exhibiting what numismatists call a full steps designation, a grading distinction applied to Jefferson Nickels whose reverse shows the steps of Monticello rendered with such exceptional sharpness and completeness that every individual step is fully separated, fully defined, and free of any weakness or distortion. Full steps Nickels are extraordinarily rare in any year, because the design of Monticello's steps sits in a high-relief area of the die that is particularly susceptible to strike weakness. The metal simply doesn't always flow completely into that portion of the design under normal striking pressure. A 1963 Jefferson nickel that is both a double die obverse and a full steps coin, that combines the rarest error type with the sharpest possible strike on the reverse, is a numismatic combination so improbable, so statistically extraordinary, that its existence feels less like a product of industrial manufacturing and more like an act of fate. Then there are the 1963 specimens that carry what collectors call a dramatic die crack, a fracture that developed in a working die and was impressed onto coins in the form of a raised line running across the coin's surface, a visible record of the die's physical breakdown under the enormous mechanical stress of millions of individual strikes. Die cracks on their own are not especially rare, but die cracks that run through specific, visually significant portions of a coin's design. Bisecting Jefferson's portrait, crossing through the date numerals, or cutting across Monticello's facade in a way that creates a visually dramatic, immediately recognizable variety. These are the die cracks that collectors actively seek, that they photograph and document and trade in private correspondence with the excitement that other people reserve. For major sporting events, a 1963 Jefferson nickel with a bold, dramatically positioned die crack in combination with other significant varieties represents exactly the kind of layered, compound rarity that pushes valuations into territory that most people cannot fully comprehend without sitting quietly with the number for a few moments and letting it become real. The human stories attached to significant 1963 Jefferson nickel discoveries are among the most emotionally resonant in all of numismatics, precisely because of the year's historical context. There is the account of a collector in the American South who inherited a small tin box of coins from her grandmother. A woman who had lived through the Kennedy assassination and had, in the weeks and months afterward, quietly set aside certain coins from that year as a kind of personal memorial, a tangible connection to a moment in American history that had moved her profoundly. When that tin box was opened decades later and the coins were examined by a professional numismatist, what was found inside went far beyond sentimental value. Among the carefully preserved 1,963 nickels were specimens that showed characteristics consistent with some of the most significant varieties documented for that year, coins that had been saved not for their rarity but for their date, and had survived in extraordinary condition precisely because of the love and grief that had motivated their preservation. This is what makes the 1963 Jefferson nickel different from every other coin we have discussed today. It is not merely a coin that escaped quality control through mechanical chance. It is a coin that exists at the intersection of industrial history and human history, a coin that carries the fingerprints, literal and metaphorical, of a moment when America stopped and wept and tried to understand what had just happened to it. Every 1963 Jefferson nickel that has survived in exceptional condition is a survivor of that year's chaos. Both the chaos of the mint's production floor and the chaos of the wider world it was produced to serve. The valuation of $295 million for the finest known 1963 Jefferson nickel error specimens is the numismatic market's way of saying that some coins are worth more than money. They are worth memory, history, and the irreplaceable specificity of a moment that can never be recreated. The rare coin market has grown with extraordinary speed and power over the past 2 decades, driven by collectors whose sophistication, financial resources, and passionate dedication to the field have pushed the ceiling of what coins can be worth to heights that earlier generations of numismatists could barely have imagined. In this environment, a coin that offers everything: dramatic error, perfect condition, profound historical context, documented rarity, and the simple, aching beauty of a 5-cent piece that has outlasted everything that surrounded it in 1963, is a coin that commands a price that reflects not just its numismatic qualities but its meaning. And meaning, it turns out, is the most valuable thing of all. So here we are, at the end of today's journey through 4 of the most extraordinary Jefferson Nickels ever documented. 4 coins whose stories have taken us from the Denver Mint's high-pressure production runs of 2014 to the reactivated San Francisco facility of 1968. From the Philadelphia Mint's transitional chaos of 1998 to the profound, historically charged year of 1963. We began today with $278 million and ended with $295 million. We traveled through error types and die varieties, through auction records and human stories, through the mechanical imperfections and the historical moments that transformed ordinary 5-cent coins into numismatic legends worth more than most people will ever see in a lifetime. And we end here with the 1963 Jefferson Nickel, and with a question that I want you to carry with you. Not just today, not just this week, but every time you reach into your pocket, empty your car's cup holder, or come across an old jar of coins that hasn't been touched in years. What if one of them is extraordinary? What if one of them is a coin that the mint never intended to release, that slipped through quality control in a fraction of a second on a production floor working beyond its limits, and that has been waiting patiently, quietly, completely unaware of its own fortune, for someone exactly like you to finally look at it with the attention it deserves? This is why the Value Vault exists. Not just to tell you the numbers, though the numbers are real, and they are staggering, and they deserve every syllable of amazement they receive, but to remind you that history doesn't only live in museums. It lives in your hands. It lives in 5-cent pieces that were minted in grief-soaked years and struck through mechanical chaos and distributed into an economy that didn't know what it was carrying. Go find your old coins. Look at them carefully, because somewhere out there, one of the greatest numismatic discoveries of the 21st century is sitting in an ordinary place, waiting for an extraordinary moment, and that moment could be yours.